In my world there is music and good vibes and laughter and lovers, adventure and friendship. We know who we are.
Hello and welcome everybody to Be the Wellness Podcast. Adam and Vanessa Lambert. Valessa Lambert.
I have officially changed my name to Valessa. You can call me Lessa for short.
Oh, boy.
Anyway,
Yeah.
it's one of those days.
It's one of those days. It is. Yeah, it's windy outside. I don't know what's going on. Everything's confusing.
But we've got a great podcast coming up for you
We do.
With an awesome guest that has been in the paleo world for a really long time, Miss Steph Gaudreau from the Stupid Easy Paleo blog. And she actually has her own podcast as well. Mm-hmm. Harder to Kill Radio.
Indeed.
Yes, which is also an awesome resource. And she's just got such a great point of view and effortless, just a ease about her that's just really cool. And we like her.
Yep, she's awesome.
Yes.
And I mean this podcast I feel like is chock full of some gems if you really listen to what's going on. I think that there's she's just super open and honest about her journey and how she got here and what is important to her. And I think it's just cool. You know, I mean, it's one of the things that that we just like about the paleo community in general. Mm-hmm. And it's not even just the paleo community. And to some degree, we'll talk about this a little bit in the podcast, but it's the community of people who have emerged from the original paleo CrossFit world. You know what I mean? This world that like we are part of, right?
Yes.
There was this initial petri dish of, of paleo and to a large degree CrossFit.
Mm-hmm,
and out of that are all of these things, and she's one of them.
Yes.
And it's cool.
She came out of the incubator.
She came out of the
Paleo CrossFit incubator.
Yeah. And, the other thing we have in common is that our yard care is done on Mondays.
Yes, so we are also, as a bonus, providing dueling leaf blowers during this episode. So, we don't want one leaf blower is not enough per episode.
Not enough. So we apologize for a little bit of audio glitches, but
yes.
It'll be totally bearable, and we promise it only lasts for a few minutes. So
yes.
just power through. It's worth it.
It's totally worth it. And speaking of dueling leaf blowers, B-Fest is coming up.
Yes.
You don't have to make the transitions good. You can just say the words that make that a transition and then just roll right into
it. You just do it. It's like the crossfade button. You just,
fade one out and pull the other one out.
Yep. It's funny.
Yeah.
Yes, B-Fest is coming.
Yes.
And it's coming really quickly.
It's coming very quickly, yeah.
Which for us is exciting because we've been planning this thing and noodling on this for a period of time. So it's, we're stoked that it's like on the event horizon, so to speak.
Yes.
But for you all, it means that you really need to get on board with signing up if you plan on coming, because spots are going and travel becomes more difficult and all those things. So just don't procrastinate.
Yes, don't procrastinate, because procrastination gets you nowhere.
It's true.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, I was just watching this YouTube video of I forget her name, but she's the one that talks about how when you have an impulse, you should do it in the first 5 seconds. I forget what her name is. She's a very popular kind of self-help person. Yeah. And she talks about when you have this initial feeling, you need to move within the first 5 seconds. You need to move yourself in the direction of whatever it is that you're inspired to do. Because if you wait for motivation or all of the things to align, you just never really take action. So in the next 5 seconds, go to the website, click on B-Fest and sign up.
Yeah.
And it's that easy.
So but okay, wait a second.
Yes.
So I didn't watch this on YouTube. So this person is not suggesting to just act on all your impulses.
No,
she's saying if something comes up, like make a decision and either do it or don't.
Yes.
But don't noodle on it.
Well, what she's saying is that, like, what often happens is that people are waiting for the right motivation, the right timing, the
Gotcha.
right this, the right that. Oh, I'm going to get
Once
to this.
Once this happens, I'll do
then
this.
That.
Right,
and what she's saying is that you have this inner voice, this kind of knowingness about what there is to be done, but you're waiting for all the reasons and stars to align and all the things to show up in order to then take action, when she's saying that most of us intuitively know what it is that needs to be done and what action it needs to be taken, and we just simply don't take that action.
Right.
So she's all about just in that first 5 seconds, like getting into action.
Yeah. So when you have that thing, that knowingness, that inner voice, that whatever it pops up, just take the first step.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool.
And I think especially for events like B-Fest or things like this, where it's really easy to rationalize your way out of it, or for it to seem overwhelming or whatever. But if you have that instinct of knowing that there's something here for you within this community, within these events, then, at some point it's all about just taking that action. And whether you do that with B-Fest or you do that with whatever it is in your life that will make a difference, that will make a profound shift in the way that you live your life, do it.
Pull the trigger. Yeah. 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 So one thing about that is that whatever that thing is, if it's going to be impactful and have a profound impact, it has to register as a big deal to you. Mm-hmm. So whether that's a financial thing or a physical thing or a whatever, like in order for there to really be meaning and change in what goes on, it has to be something that you're overcoming or have some meaning. Otherwise, it's like if you go to you're like, oh, I always just go with what my inner voice says when I'm at the ice cream shop, and it's like vanilla, and you get vanilla. You're like, dude, there's not enough at risk. You know what I mean? Like, well, that's not what we're talking about here.
Yes.
It has to be something that is like, no, this is my inner voice is telling me to do this. There's all sorts of reasons why I shouldn't, but I just know this is right.
Right.
And take that step and see what happens.
Yes.
The other thing I will say about this is that often taking the first step just creates the momentum that leads to the eventual decision, which may not even be what that inner voice was saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So it's taking the first step. It's all you have is what you're committed to in your life and the first step of what to do next.
Yes.
Like at any given point.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know what.
So B-Fest is a metaphor for your life, basically.
Yes, exactly. And Jason Tsai will be there. Yes. And that's cool.
Yeah, which is very exciting. And the Cordozas and Angela De La Cruz and obviously us. We've got quite a group of bees that are going to be there. We've got quite a robust part of the community, and we want you to be part of it. So come join.
Come do it. It'll be cool.
And speaking of risk, Steph Gaudreau talks a lot about the risks she's taken and what it's led to in her life, and how making those first decisions to really go out on a limb has literally changed the course of her life. So seems like a perfect segue to hop on in, and we hope that you guys enjoy this awesome, inspiring podcast with Steph Gaudreau.
Sweet. And we're live. Welcome to the podcast, Steph.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's exciting to get to talk to you. You've been in this game for a while now, this whole paleo world. And we were Rob Wolf's clients back in the day when he had his gym in NorCal. And I remember your blog coming onto the set, and I remember just loving the name of it, Stupid Easy Paleo, because it was just like, I think that was the first time where all of us had discovered like, oh, being healthy could be easy. It doesn't have to be this struggle, stress, diet, crazy, mental game that we have. And it seems like that really is sort of the context of your vibe. You're just kind of this no bullshit, like, let's just do this, let's just have fun, and let's just go at it. So maybe tell us a little bit about your background and how you got interested in health and nutrition, and then where paleo sort of fit into that.
Yeah. How long do we have? No, I'll keep it as brief as I can. So, I have a very common story in a lot of ways. And I think, when I look out into the world and I think, why am I here doing this? Like, I'm a normal person. Like, there's nothing that's that unique or special about me. I share a story that's very common to a lot of women and men. And, why am I here? And I think it is because I understand what it's like to be in the position of people who are now on this health seeking journey. And so I think that's the relatability is there, which is really cool. That sounds like an Instant Pot. Is that an Instant Pot?
It totally is.
That happens on my show too. So growing up, all through my teens, I dabbled in dieting. I was never happy in my body. I didn't feel good. I was always like, why are my thighs so big? I hate this. And, a lot of that precipitated just sort of in my 20s, doing everything I could to just try to make my body smaller and being on a diet and, rinse, repeat for many, many years. I have 12 years as a veteran classroom teacher. So I was teaching high school science, and that was my career. And then in about late 2009, I was heavily into mountain biking, was racing endurance distances, and was super into being on my bike. And, looking back, it was definitely a way to try to be kind of in a socially acceptable circle where exercising to an unhealthy level was acceptable. And
right.
I was always just trying to get skinnier, and that was okay because the lighter you are on a bike, the faster you can go and the more power you can output and the faster you can climb up hills. And in 2009, I was racing bikes pretty heavily, and two friends of mine were like, we're doing this thing called the paleo diet where you don't eat any gluten. And I was like, what's a gluten? I mean, I have no idea. And, so long story short, I read Dr. Cordain's book with Joe Friel, sort of like had my holiday fun. I was like, well, if I'm going to do this thing, then I'm just going to go, it's going to be YOLO over the holidays. This is kind of the end of 2009 in the fall. And so I was like, all right, we're going to do Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. We're going to do it big. And then we're going to just dive right into this paleo thing.
Right.
And so I
blow it up.
Yeah, blow it up. I didn't really have a lot of context. I didn't really, other than reading that one book, that was about it. And there weren't a lot of cookbooks at the time. I still have the first cookbook I ever bought, which is Paleo Comfort Foods by Charles and Julie Mayfield. And then pretty soon afterwards, Bill and Haley Staley came on the scene with Make It Paleo. And so I still have those original books, but like there really wasn't a lot. Rob's book, it was sort of, the few resources that I had at my fingertips. But anyway, I started doing it. And within a few months, I started to feel a lot better than I ever had. Looking back, I definitely struggled with hypoglycemia, although I didn't know what that was at the time. I was, dependent on sugar. And, you would look at me from the outside and think, you look totally normal. You're, a fit person. Even though I was really unhappy with my body, like you're a fit person, look like a healthy person, but that definitely wasn't what was going on the inside, not to mention the sort of mental, emotional struggles that I was having. So long story short, after, doing it for a few months, I started writing recipes and putting them on my then mountain biking blog, which I wish existed still because it would have been really hilarious to go back and see it. But somewhere along the line, a friend of mine said something like, you should start a food blog. And I was like, okay, I don't know about blogging. I was teaching high school at the time. It wasn't a thing, it wasn't like, oh, I am going to start this blog and it's going to become a thing and I'm going to leave my job and work for myself. Like that was never anywhere on the radar. But I started Stupid Easy Paleo in the fall of 2011. So I'd been doing paleo for about a year and a half. And that's kind of what started it all. And then I was going through some personal changes. I was getting a divorce, was feeling really unsettled in my job. And I actually had switched schools and that didn't help me to feel any better. And, over the months, like it started to pick up in popularity and people were asking me about it. And like my blog was getting visitors and my social media was growing.
You're like, what's happening?
Yeah, like, this is cool. And, so I sort of got this wild idea that what if I could do this for a living? I mean, I love nutrition. I love science. I love cooking. I love helping people. I'm a teacher at heart. Maybe I could do this. And so in June of 2013, so it's almost been 5 years, I asked for a leave of absence from my teaching job. for a year. They were like, great, you get to have a year off, but we're not going to pay you.
Right.
So, go have fun and do what you're going to do. And then that was when everything sort of got real, and we made the blog into a website and really started to work in earnest. But I feel very grateful and lucky to have had that year. And they said, you can come back after the year is over, which was, it was still scary, but to have that fallback was, it was very fortunate. And I don't take that for granted, because I know if I had to make just the absolute scariest leap of my life, I don't know if I could have done it. I mean, I was wrestling with that back and forth, but here we are 5 years later.
And it all panned out.
It all panned out.
So it's interesting because they, you hear this a lot in entrepreneurial circles anyway, like, oh, if I had a plan B, I would have never made it. You can't have a plan B. It's got to be all ahead all the time. And if there's anything to fall back on, you're going to fall back on it. And you're like, well, but sometimes that's not true. Like sometimes it's really nice to have something, to catch you when you fall, if it should happen. But luckily for everyone out there, that's not the case with you, because you've been producing great content and what I think is a really cool approach to this whole thing of, eating better and fundamentally moving better, and then just not getting super stuck on
it. Totally. To your point about this idea about entrepreneurship too, I come from my dad's side of the family. There's some self-employment, my uncles and my grandfather owned their own business, but I wasn't close with that side of my family. My mom's side of the family, it was like, you work at a company until you retire, and you get your, you get your nice bonuses, and you ride off into the sunset. And that's the safe and secure way. I don't have any role models in my immediate family who are entrepreneurial. And I consider myself a pretty risk averse person, which I've had to learn to, loosen up a little bit and take some chances and be a little bit more willing to take risk. But that's been one of the hardest lessons of my life, is to find a way to honor myself, but yet stretch myself and try to grow. And I'll tell you what, and I had no background in business at all. I was, I majored in biology and got a master's degree in education. So I don't know anything about business. And it's literally been a learning process this entire 5 years about how this stuff works.
Yeah. Well, it's fraught with peril. I mean, there's landmines out there just everywhere. You're like, who even knew this was a thing? You're like, well, everybody. You're like, well, not everybody, because I'm technically a business person and I didn't know anything about this.
For sure.
So what have been some of those tools that have helped you become more comfortable with taking those risks, or for stepping out of your comfort zone? Like, what are your go-to things when you come up against something and you're like, okay, I recognize that this is the moment where I would shy away from this scenario, or I would, tend to take the safe route. What are the things that you dig in with at that point to help you kind of expand what's possible?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have had some amazing coaches and mentors and teachers, and it's been a process of kind of self-discovery and being willing to confront the anxiety. I still have a lot of anxiety and fear around money. It's just it's like my story. And it was my story all growing up. I mean, my mom was a single mom for some time, and, was a waitress and had no secondary education other than high school. And, my family was a real blue collar people, working folks, and money was always really tight. We had 4 kids on a waitress and a truck driver's salary. So it was always an undercurrent. And for me, that continues to be something that I'll come up against these things and I get immediately into that scarcity mindset. And it's been a process of learning to step away and observe when I'm in that mode. And, one of my coaches, Allegra Stein, I don't know where I'd be without Allegra. She's really helped me to question, and to be able to take that observational role in my own fear process and my own thought process, to just go, wait a minute. Okay. Hold on. before we get too carried away here, because I have a fantastic imagination,
Uh-huh.
what's really the reality here? And can we ever really know the outcome of our decisions either way? If I get outside the comfort zone or I stay inside the comfort zone, no one knows what's going to happen. And I was definitely a person who, when I started working for myself, was very much fraught by analysis paralysis. And it's been, I mean, I wish I had a magical, like, you just do this and it all gets better. But it's just been a process of practice and confronting those beliefs and living through the discomfort and going, okay, well, my brain is trying to avoid things that are unsafe or dangerous or
it's natural.
The things that cause fear and kind of thinking, okay, well, but I've taken these smaller steps and nothing bad happened. Like, I'm still here. I'm still alive. And that's part of the process. And as hard as it is to swallow, sometimes the tough experiences, the failures are oftentimes the best teachers. And as I always call myself a recovering perfectionist. That's, and of course goes hand in hand with this idea of like the anxiety and the wanting to do it all right because you're afraid. And I totally get that. So it's just been practice and working through it and learning to be self-aware in a lot of ways. That's helped.
Yeah. So I have a lot of sort of sympathy for your situation. It's like my full-time job still is with the fire department, and I'm trying to make that move away. It's like I've been doing it for a long time, and it's just, this is like where my passion lies and the things that I feel the best about doing, and like where I think I'm most useful is in this other world now, so I'm trying to make that transition, but it's tough. You know what I mean? It's a no joke thing to pick up roots and move. And it's like that internal fear around money or around any number of the things that pop up in that, or it's really strong, it's like it's a really real thing. And you'll get so much agreement in your fear, meaning that like, oh, well, I'm afraid if I quit my job. Oh yeah, you should not quit your job. Are you kidding me? There's people who are lining up to get the job that you're talking about leaving. You're like, yeah, but those are, it's really hard to say, yeah, but those are those people. And I was that guy once, and now I'm not anymore. And now I want to do this other thing. So it's an interesting, I don't want to say struggle. It's not necessarily the word for it, but man, is it an interesting dynamic in your brain to go through this and like, coming up with your own reasons why this is a good idea, or this is a better idea, or this is like a worse idea. But one of the things you said that I think I want to kind of highlight a little bit is that we don't really know. I could stay in my job, or you could have stayed in your job as a teacher, and something catastrophic could have happened, and it still would have sucked. You know what I mean? And you would have had a terrible, like, who knows what happens? They lay everybody off and you are destitute and you're living on the street. That could have very well happened. Or you could quit your job and everything fails and you're destitute and you wind up on the street. And it's like, both of those options are totally there. And I know, like, for me, the part that's like that, the hang up around it is that if I stayed in my job and chose the safe route and still wound up destitute on the street, I could throw my hands up and be like, well, boy, I did everything I thought I could. I had all the things, and I was in the career and I was doing all this, and man, it's just my luck. Here I am, but if you make that jump, you really have to take ownership for your path and where you wind up. And I think, I'm guessing, maybe you can tell me this, but like, that there's a lot of fear around that, but once you do it and you take that ownership and then every little success that you have is really yours, and it's got to be super rewarding. I'm hoping.
Yeah, it is, and I think I fall into the trap that a lot of driven, motivated individuals fall into, which is failing to take stock and failing to reflect. And think, we're always striving for better. And that there's nothing wrong with self-improvement and wanting to better your business and, all that stuff. But having some perspective is really important. And, for example, keeping a training log. I mean, one of the things that people, folks that I coach, and I've done this too, is like, I haven't made any progress. I'm still weak. I haven't broken through this plateau or whatever it is. And I'm like, when's the last time you looked back at your training log, and saw your progress over 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years.
Right.
You're not
Right.
where you were when you started, are you? And well, yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
You know, and I've had to do the same for myself and my business too, is like take stock, remember where you've come from and what you've learned and what you've overcome and the challenges and how you've persevered. And that to me is really the really rewarding part of it all, is to look back. But you have to do that regularly. You have to make that a practice, because if not, you get so focused on what's ahead and what you haven't yet achieved there has to be kind of I love this idea of equilibrium, this idea of like a push pull, a looking back, a looking forward, a taking stock, a reaching for more. And when those two things are kind of not at their 50-50, but when they're in the right equilibrium, it ends up being a much more fulfilling place to be, rather than one existing without the other.
Well, it's interesting too, because you talked about being a risk adverse person, but yet there must have been already discomfort in what you were doing prior, right? So there must have been, I think this is where people get stuck, is they think that the discomfort is only in the doing something unknown. But the thing is, when you stay in something that you know isn't fitting you or isn't, quite the right fit anymore, that's uncomfortable too. It's just a different kind of discomfort.
Yeah, because it's the discomfort inherent in the familiar rather than the discomfort inherent in the unknown. And, where our brains are, again, sort of wired to avoid that change of the unknown, even if it could turn out better. We're like, oh, this uncomfortable, familiar thing is familiar. So I'm just going to stay here. Yeah.
So talk about your fitness practice and I know obviously you post a lot working out at CrossFit, and maybe just talk about your relationship with fitness in general and kind of your approach to it these days, and what it provides for you from, a physical, but also from like an emotional, spiritual, cognitive level.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've always been kind of an active person. I started competing in soccer when I was 8, and I've really competed in some kind of sport for the last 30 years. I mean, I've always been doing something. And, again, coming off of almost a decade of endurance competing and mostly mountain biking, but a little bit of triathlon at the very end, I started to get really burnt out with spending long hours training. I mean, long hours all day on the bike, all day doing bricks and swimming. And I just kind of was tired of it. And, again, still on this quest to like try to mold my body into something that it just isn't made to be.
Right.
I look at my maternal line in my family, and I'm like, we're all like Polish, Ukrainian farmers, just sturdy people, never going to be the 5'10" model. That's just how I was put together. But, so 2010, actually about 8 months after I started eating paleo, I walked into a CrossFit gym. A friend of mine dared me to try a CrossFit workout in my garage. I dared my friend to do a Bikram yoga workout. And we sort of traded dares and both survived. And I was like, actually, this is kind of fun. So I walked into the local CrossFit gym and started doing CrossFit a few times a week. And it was a great escape for me because it was totally new. And I just, for the first time, like, it didn't matter a lick how like small I was. It was like actually just paying attention to what my body could do. And I mean, I for me, endurance work just didn't do that for me. For some people it does, and that's great, but that's not what it gave me. So for the first time, I kind of was like, I can come in here and not worry about how small I am.
Right.
And that was really freeing. I mean,
yeah,
I can't really, unless you've been through that, where you've spent like all of your, as much of your waking hours as you can imagine thinking about your body and it not being right and wanting to change it and obsessing about it and like thinking about the next meal and did I eat too much fat and I'm going to have to exercise longer to burn off more calories. Like that, it takes so much away from a person. And the freedom that I felt for the first time in years of like releasing that and having so much more brain space to create other cool things and do other cool things was like, it's indescribable what that's like.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how it started. And, I don't actually do much CrossFit anymore.
Okay. Yeah, this seems to be the natural progression.
Yeah. So after doing CrossFit and competing for a few years, I sort of, actually when I started working for myself, I was like, I don't have, now I have to put more energy into growing this business and surviving and making this work. And I looked at my husband and who I was engaged to at the time, and I was like, I can't do competitive CrossFit anymore. I just can't do it. I don't have enough energy. Something's going to break. Right. My adrenals, my body, my brain, something's going to break. And so I started just strength training and weightlifting. And now I do kind of a mixed modality of different stuff. Like some days I go in and clean and snatch, and some days I go in and power lift, and some days I go in and monkey around with dumbbells. And I do jujitsu 3 times a week now. I've been doing that for the last year. So nowadays it's a little bit more like, what's the least I can do to get the most, the most benefit, which, coming from an long endurance background is like the complete opposite of how I used to function. It was like needing to do more and more. And so now I sort of try to play this game of like, what's the best stimulus I can get from the least amount of work, and just having fun and listening to my body more. And I'm almost 40. I mean, I love being active, but I'm like, I don't recover as quickly now.
Right.
I just like
things are different.
Yeah. Like for me, competing it's not as alluring as it used to be. And I used to, in a lot of ways, I used to use competition to prove my worth.
Yeah.
And again, that's not for everyone. And I'm not saying that that's how I still function. I actually haven't competed in anything in like a year or so in weightlifting wise, but I'm just sort of like, it's okay if I don't compete. I'm fine.
Yeah. It's tricky. We come from the CrossFit world, and, we're in CrossFit early on, when the point of CrossFit was to do the least amount necessary.
Yes. The quickest workout, Fran, 3 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah. Like, so it's interesting because, I'm just kind of speaking to that point that you made about for the first time feeling like you're in a place where it didn't matter how skinny you were, it didn't matter how small, like you could actually be a powerful female. And I definitely relate to that, and I have a big butt and I'm a gymnast and I come from like an athletic background. So it was, I totally relate to that first time of being in a place where it's like, wow, what I have to offer is valuable here without having to be something different.
Right.
Like who I am actually works for this scenario. And I think it's no matter what happens with CrossFit and how much it's changed, I actually still really love and appreciate it overall for the voice it's given, or the place in the world, the athletic world, that it's given so many women to feel really good about how they are and how they move and how they look without having to focus on that being the smallest person in the room. And I think no matter what happens with CrossFit, I'm super grateful to that as an overarching theme. So I totally relate to that. And I just, I think that's such an important thing. However, I also think it's super important that we don't like bash all the women who are naturally thin and naturally small. And because I do see there's almost like a pendulum swing where it's like strong is the new skinny. And it's like, well, what if you're actually just a thin woman and it's hard for you to be super strong? Like, do we have to be mean to her? It's okay.
Sure. I think it's about letting people show up as they are. And, instead of trying to change ourselves to fit a particular mold, is letting things evolve, or just letting ourselves be who we feel like we are on the inside. And, and I totally agree. I really don't like the strong is the new skinny thing. And I'm like, I have to say like strong is strong, and that's going to look different for different people.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And what if like all the food is on the other side of a very small gap? Like you're going to need the skinny people. Like they're going to need to be around, I mean, and so this is like, it's part of the reason that I really like your harder to kill lifestyle, because it's like, and it's one of the things I think that mean, fundamentally, kind of what we've been talking about here is that when you, like with CrossFit as the example, when you change the goal from some aesthetic ideal or whatever it is to something that's performance based, where you're like, no, I don't really care how you do this. Like, these are the parameters. The one who can do it the most or the fastest or whatever is who's regarded in this community, right? And so we've fundamentally changed the focus of the goal, or the goal of the fitness program or whatever. And, Rob said it forever, like, you should just, track some biomarkers of health and disease and some sort of physical performance objective.
Mm-hmm.
Like those things you just need to do. And if they get better over time, you're doing it right. If they get worse over time, you need to tweak something. And so this idea of the goal being harder to kill, like, this is the deal. You should be harder to kill by falling rocks and by ischemic heart disease and by, just like all of the diseases of modern civilization. So maybe just kind of run us through what's your philosophy on this? Where are you coming from with that?
Yeah. So, I mean, over the course of a few years, this has evolved, but back in 2015, I was looking for a way to put all of this stuff that I've learned, for myself, all the things that have become important components of my life. And it started with food, right? It started with eating differently, but it has evolved and changed and become multi-layered. And it hasn't just been what I ate that sort of helped me to really change my life and my outlook. And through working with people, on social media and through the website, I started to see that as well. And so in 2015, I decided to put together a program that would help people experience different habits, because it's one thing to read about it. I mean, we're constantly bombarded with information online. It's ridiculous, the amount of information that we see. But, can you actually do it? Can you actually try things? And can you actually do it in an environment where you feel like it's okay for it not to work, or it's okay to decide it's not for you? And so I created this program based on 4 pillars. And so the pillars are, and when I looked back, I was like, okay, what do people really need? And what do they want? What they want isn't always what they need, right? And so certainly the exercise, food part, a lot of people are like, yeah, I know I need to like eat better and probably move my body. But the 4 pillars of health for this program became eat foods that nourish you, which I feel like, I don't say eat paleo, because as I evolve and change, and I'm in school right now to be a nutritional therapist, and, and I'm coming at it now from a slightly different approach. So it's like, what might work for you as a nourishing food might not work for someone else. So can we personalize that? So eat nourishing foods, strengthen your body. And again, that's kind of broad. I didn't say lift weights. Certainly I encourage people to lift something regardless of what their other sports are and what they like to do. It's important to have that balance. And as we age, it's important to be able to preserve muscle mass and bone density, but it's not just lifting weights. It's how you take care of your body. Are you getting up and moving around more? Are you doing the things to maintain your tissues and all that stuff? And do things that you like, right? Like play and do things that are unstructured. The 3rd pillar became recharge your energy. So again, it's not just sleep. It's like, okay, sleep matters, obviously, but how we approach our day matters a lot too. And how we recharge our batteries throughout the day matters a lot. And then the last pillar is to get your mind right. That's what I call it. I used to call it master your mindset. And I'm like, and it's not think positive, because you can't always think positive, but get your mind right. Like the mindset, the habits, the perspective, the mindfulness, all of those things, in my opinion, are the most important. But but you can't, but most people aren't going to come to me and go, I think the way I think about food is really messed up. And so it's a layer that a lot of people often can't see, or they're not ready for. And so the way I kind of see it is, and I presented this last year at the Ancestral Health Society in New Zealand, is kind of like a bullseye, like a dartboard, like a bullseye. And ultimately we have kind of like the physical things on the outside. Those are kind of the low hanging fruit, right? Can I walk a mile every day? Can I drink half my body weight in ounces of water? Can I add a vegetable to my meals? And I always try to go for the additive approach whenever possible, just to get people started. Yes, you'll have to take some things out. Like if you're drinking 2 liters of diet soda a day, like eventually that's probably going to be something that comes out. But when you lead with that and you're like, by the way, the thing you love the most, you have to get rid of it right now. Most people are like, oh, hell no.
Right.
Go pound sand. I'm not changing anything. Bye.
Right.
So those physical things on the outside, then for a lot of people end up becoming kind of, as we move toward the center, like mental things that they then work on, like, okay, habits and how we, cutting back on multitasking and things like that. And then that eventually, for most people, that journey is naturally kind of gets them to the ooey gooey core of the emotions, the spirit, why, the valuing of ourselves, the purpose of our lives, the things that are harder for people to just dive in. And if you know anything about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you'll know that that's kind of what I've done here, except I kind of see it as like moving from the outside in instead of moving from the bottom to the top.
Got it. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, it's cool because like you've also simplified it in a sense, right? Because I know sometimes people get so overwhelmed, like there's so many things to do. And sometimes you just have to start with, here's some basic things you can start doing to make a difference in your life. And I think that's such a great approach. So when you are looking forward in the future, either for your own growth, your own life, or even just within your business, what are you most excited about these days?
That's a great question. For me, I really get excited about helping guide women toward the best way I can say it is like getting back in touch with their sense of inner power, whatever that looks like for that woman. Like, and I know empowerment has kind of become an overused word, and yet at the core of, I think, what I'm interested in helping people do is go, okay, yes, there are some things that I kind of need to do to feel better. And when I feel better physically and mentally, then I have the brain space and the capacity to pursue the things that I'm really excited about in my own life. And, the hard thing is like, I could say my goal is to sell as many supplements to the world as possible and make a lot of money. That's a very tangible thing, right? Like I can sell this supplement or this many things or whatever it is, like something very tangible. What I do is very intangible and it's different for every person. And that's very challenging because everybody's path is going to look different. And we know that there are some inputs that work for, a wide variety of people. And if we can just stop overthinking it and do some of these basics, we're going to move the dial forward and get to that spot. But it's a huge challenge to say, okay, like I'm going to help you figure out your life.
Yeah.
Like how, there's so many entry points. And this is the thing I love about sort of this 4-pillar approach that I have is, and I know there are so many people that have 4 pillars, by the way, now, like, and Rob is one of them. They're all slightly different. Dr. Rangan Chatterjee is another one, 4 pillars. He's amazing. And I think we're just trying to think like, let's get back to brass tacks. Like, let's get back to basics. But when I look at these 4 pillars, I see it as like, okay, we have 4 different on-ramps to this kind of freeway of like health seeking. But the getting on the freeway and being on the freeway is not the destination. So a lot of people go through this very active process of health seeking and like tweaking and like being in it, or like learning, right? Like really being going through the suck and having the big things that happen and like making it work. And eventually though, you got to exit the freeway, right? You got to go to your destination. And what's the destination? It's like life well lived. It's being able to express who you are, and and so it's a little bit more right. So how do we get people there? Like, how do we get them invested in that process? And it does come back down to sometimes those different on-ramps. For me this year, I'm going to be rebranding, which is another, when you initially asked me that, I sort of was like, oh gosh, remembering changing all these things. And, people often ask me, they're like, whoa, like Stupid Easy Paleo is so successful. And I'm like, well, let's talk about the fact that we're changing it all this year, and we're changing the brand name. It's going to go to my name, but it's this idea of like, I want to be the guide that helps you figure out this path. And I'm going to give you some constraints, right? Like, I don't want you just wandering around in the woods and getting lost forever.
Right.
So it's like, okay, here's some things that you can do. Here's some parameters. Here's a framework. But ultimately, you have to walk that path too.
Right.
And so I'm really excited about that, because it is what I really believe is so helpful. And I am so tired of like seeing women struggling because they, and I was in this spot too. Like, they don't know that there's another option besides the, dieting to lose 10 pounds in a week and the false promises. And I still get real frustrated with that, because I'm like, why haven't things changed? There's still a lot of work to do in that area, and to, help people when they're ready. And I think, so for me going forward, that's where we're moving, is this idea of like personalized nutrition is, can we take this 4-pillar approach and help you create your own journey and sort of support you on that journey. And then, ultimately the book that's coming out next year is going to be presenting that for those 4 pillars to the greater world, which I'm really excited about. So yeah, I mean, we're not saying like paleo is the worst thing you could ever do for yourself. We're just now switching to a slightly wider definition. And again, giving some time and airspace to this fact that like, it is one potential way to get started. And for me, it was fantastic, because there was a way for me to kind of understand how to eat better.
Right.
That's not the only way. And for a lot of people over time, they have to, naturally customize it and figure out what works for them in the context of their life and their health, and making it more welcoming to a wider community. So that's what's on the horizon. And it's again, it's kind of scary. It's one of those moments where it's like, what am I doing?
Am I really doing this?
Like, oh no. But everyone evolves.
Yes, absolutely.
People evolve, websites evolve, and websites are run by people. And honoring that and realizing that, and that's kind of what you were talking about earlier with the fire department. And like, for me, it was my teaching job, is like, I kept butting up against this. I am ready to molt and like shed this skin. And if I don't do it, I am only going to feel more uncomfortable.
Right.
In that position.
And I actually think, even though, everyone kind of in this paleo world has that sort of basic understanding, I think most everyone that's been in this world for a long time is kind of saying the same thing. Over time, this is going to change, and whatever direction that goes for you. But I think that the cool thing about the paleo audience is I think they're actually quite receptive to that message at this point. And I think they're hearing it from so many different thought leaders and people out there who've been in this game for a long time, that are, obviously just saying this is the natural thing of anything in life. You change, you adapt, you take what you know now and you apply it to your life in the way that makes the most sense. And so I think that's the cool thing, is that even though, even if you're leaving that paleo branding behind, I think the audience itself is actually quite receptive to that.
Yeah, and that's been my experience so far. And I've been really transparent with people that change is coming, and this is why, and this is what you can expect. And, it's not going to become a food porn website. Like, we're not going off the rails here. But I think you're right, and you hit it so spot on, is that paleo really started as a grassroots movement, and it wasn't the FDA or the USDA or the MyPlate. It wasn't the government saying, or these huge outside forces saying, well, this is what you guys need to do. and so it's been a place where there's been more conversation and there's been more of that learning as we go and going like, I mean, I remember when Rob took down his fish oil calculator and he was like, and I really loved him for that. Cause he was like, you know what? This isn't right. This doesn't work anymore. This is what we thought was right. And I changed my mind and I'm going to say that this isn't a good idea anymore to take super high doses of fish oil. And I always have really respected Rob for, being very open and forthcoming about saying like, hey, things have changed for me or things have changed in our understanding. And so I think that's the value of this, of community, right? Overall is like, hey, we're willing to even though we still get into arguments about potatoes, there's more of a general openness to saying this is uncharted territory here. Like, in terms of getting back to this way of living and this way of eating.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is something that I've looked up to Rob for a lot of reasons for a long time, but that is really one that really stands out. I mean, his, damn the torpedoes mentality. And I mean, I'm sure that it's cost him millions of dollars by this point, like his like general unwillingness to, drive the company line when there's obviously different information out there. It's, is that really overwhelming, that leaf blower?
There's our leaf blower.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
This is an episode of
That's
Yard
funny.
Work
This is the lawn care episode, which I have to give us all a hand for maintaining our line of thought here.
Yeah.
Awesome. So, Steph, tell people where they can find you, and also if you want to share about the book and when that's coming out. By all means, we'd love to hear when all that stuff is going to hit.
Yeah. Tentatively, the book will be out next spring. So spring of 2019. I'm not going to say any dates yet because we're still kind of in the early stages of all of that. But look for a spring of 2019 release, which seems like a million years away, but it will be here in a snap.
It goes real faster soon. Than you think. Yeah.
And you can still find everything at stupideasypaleo.com and Stupid Easy Paleo at all social media. And, when things come time to switch over, all you have to do is still type that in and you'll go to the new destination.
It'll be, all new. So I have one follow-up question about something you've got going here that I think is super cool. And I'm hoping that it moves along with the new rebranding and everything. But give the listeners a quick rundown on your Real Plans situation.
Well, Real Plans is really quite fantastic because Emily and Anthony, who created this software, means you can create a 100% customizable meal plan to your spec. Like one of the hardest things about meal plan, like having someone help you meal plan, is you're either going to have to buy a meal plan and then adapt it to your preferences and dietary restrictions and how many people are in your family, or pay someone to do it for you, which is super expensive.
Right.
And so now I'm partnering with them. You can get 270 of my best recipes in Real Plans. It's like an extra $1 a month. And you've got 1,500 recipes that come standard with it. And you can plan a month of meals in 5 minutes. And that's totally not an exaggeration. So for people that don't have the time now, for a long time, you couldn't get my recipes there, but you can now. And so I think, I always wanted to do meal plans for people, and I did for a while, and it just became really difficult because, again, it wasn't, ever suitable. There were always, issues with that. So if you guys want meal plans that are still healthy and all that stuff, but you don't have to worry about, you don't have to customize it after the fact, then it's a pretty awesome deal.
It's a pretty good way to go.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It's super cool. And so this is one of the things that, I think is really important. And you mentioned this earlier, is this idea that you can give people frameworks and guidelines, but they still need to be able to go out in the world and operate. And it's one of the kind of beefs that I've had with traditional meal plans in the past, where you come to me, actually you can't do this, or I can't do this in California, but you come to me and say, I want to do this. And I give you this cut and dry meal plan that is, eat this for breakfast and this and this and this. And here's your recipes and here's all this stuff. While it's super convenient for the person, as long as they're continuing to pay you to provide this service, they very seldom actually learn how to do this in the real world. And I feel like with real plans and with this overall framework that you're providing here, you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get a really succinct way of planning your meals and understanding what it is that you want to eat, but you still have to be able to put the thought into it, put the intention into it, and ultimately complete the task and perform.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where the gold is for people being able to move forward and not have to always be on a plan.
For sure.
So I think it's cool.
Yeah,
I guess
it's like using like navigation, and you never learn how to get there, and you're like, I can't get there without my phone, even though I've driven there 8,000 times.
It's so true. It's so true. And the thing that I really love about it is, you get shopping lists and all that jazz, but it also gives, like, for people that are really just not familiar with cooking, it gives you sort of a strategy sheet for the week, and it says, don't forget, defrost your meat now for tomorrow, or like put this in the slow cooker before you go to bed, and it gives,
that's awesome.
It gives reminders for people who aren't as familiar with cooking, because I think we just assume, like, oh, hey, eat better. And it's just about the decision about what you're going to eat, not about how you're going to make it. And there is legitimately a lot of people who they never learned how to cook from their family. Their families weren't, they didn't cook a lot at home, or whatever the reason. And cooking is very intimidating for a lot of people. And unless we can address that first and foremost, it's like, forget trying to just make all the healthier choices. And being healthier does require most people to spend more time in the kitchen. So that's a huge one for people.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking this time today. It's been awesome to finally connect with you. I know you've been putting in work, really hard work in this community for a long time, and it's exciting to see people grow and change. And I think that's just really exciting that you're, staying in your truth, like who you are now, and moving that forward. And that's just really inspiring. And we are excited to see where that takes you.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys, we'll see you soon. And if you want to find Steph, again, you can find her on Stupid Easy Paleo, and also your podcast, Harder to Kill Radio.
Yep, that's where you can find me.
All right, we'll see
Thanks
you soon.
Again.
Bye.
Bye. And that's a wrap, folks. We hope you enjoyed that podcast with Steph Gaudreau, Stupid Easy Paleo, soon to be something else.
Soon to be who knows what.
Which is exciting.
It's very exciting.
You know what else is exciting?
What else?
5-star reviews on iTunes.
Heck yeah.
They'll just make you feel like $1 million.
Yeah, so if you guys have not gathered that we basically base our entire value in whether or not you've left us a 5-star review, let us make that clear.
Right. My entire existence is hanging on the next 5-star review on iTunes.
5-star review, yes.
Yeah.
And hit that subscribe button while you're there, because we've got some awesome podcasts. We've been having amazing guests, and it's just easy to miss an episode if you're not automatically subscribing and downloading those episodes. So make sure to hit that subscribe button, leave that review, and be on the Be the Wellness podcast train.
Bam. The other thing about subscribing is if you subscribe, you automatically download the episode.
Yes.
And when you automatically download the episode, you get a chance to hear the things I missed in editing before I catch them and change them.
Yes.
And this happens occasionally,
it
1
does.
in 20-ish.
Yep.
And sometimes it's pretty funny.
It's like getting the penny that has 2 Abraham Lincoln heads.
What? The two-sided penny? Is that a thing?
I don't even know. But it's like that.
It's like that.
Basically, you
it's
have
special.
a chance of getting the two-sided penny version of the Be the Wellness podcast.
Yeah, and you just never know what's going to happen in there. So that's the distinct upside to being a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber and you just go get it from the cloud, odds are I will have corrected the problem.
Fixed it by then.
And off we go. So anyway, little extra bonus for you.
So
it's like a blooper reel.
If you're a gotcha girl or a gotcha guy, then you'll appreciate that.
Yeah, it's a real-time blooper reel, which is, always entertaining.
Absolutely. So we hope you guys enjoyed that podcast, and we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.